As promised in our last session, we are going to consider this demon-possessed man, which occurred just after Christ calmed the storm and calmed the sea, and just before the healing of those two daughters. Okay, so this is sandwiched in between two events, one which we considered fairly briefly, and the other which we considered a little more expansively. However, we must begin this with with the acknowledgement that this is a challenging subject in our contemporary day. There have been polls, there have been studies asking people if they believe in the existence of God, and the percentages are at least much higher as opposed to when they're asked if they believe in the devil or in demonic powers and so forth, evil spirits or unclean spirits and so on. Far fewer people believe in this. And I think part of that is this image that we have of the devil. Again, it was really implemented in the Middle Ages in order to suppress the devil through his pride. They made this devil look like this goat. Now, in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew, 4 times is a word translated demon in our English vernacular. 2 of those words are said, and that's really specifically a demon. The other, Sair, is twice translated demon, and other times it actually has to do with a goat. Part of that has to do with Esau's arms. If you remember, he was a hairy man, and so Jacob, his mother, made him skins to fool his father. So I think that's kind of partly maybe why the whole goat-looking figure of Satan emerged, because of that word. However, again, in our time, we believe less in these evil spirits. Toward the turn of the 20th century, really largely in the 19th century, we've discussed this, but theologians were trying to explain God in purely naturalistic terms. And so essentially, these demon possessions would ultimately be equated to madness and to lunacy. And I just wanted to make the point, first of all, with this belief in God as opposed to the demons, James himself in chapter 2 and verse 19 says, "You believe that there is one God. You do well. Even the demons believe and tremble." So, yes, we believe in God, and ultimately, James is even saying, hey, the demons are real too, and they all believe in God. That's not all that impressive, that you believe that there exists a God. That's not all impressive. And they tremble, and we also must tremble. He's really cautioning against the pride and the arrogance of Christians through their sanctification, through their goodness, which has been given to them by God and so forth. But I do want to make the point that the Bible makes it clear. They make a distinction between the demon-possessed and all other maladies. One example of this is found in Matthew chapter 4, verse 24, and I'm going to read from the King James. "And his fame went throughout all Syria, and they brought unto him all sick people that were taken with diverse diseases and torments, and those which were possessed with devils, and those which were lunatic, and those that had the palsy, and he healed them." So even in Matthew, this isn't Luke, but even in Matthew, he's making a distinction between the mad, the crazy, the lunatics, and the demon-possessed. Now, again, we don't see this very much. And so our culture, our time, since we're so sophisticated, rejects this evil dominion at all. I just want to make the point at the outset, the demon realm, the evil realm, the satanic realm, the demonic realm is real. It was far more elaborate when the Son of God came. Understandably, all the forces of evil came out when he came, upon his incarnation, upon his earthly ministry and so forth. So I think that's why it occurs far more here. And then it carried over into the early church. However, it seemed to decrease. And then seemed to be a time where it went away entirely until the Middle Ages again, the Dark Ages, where Rome ultimately controlled everything. And it's interesting. It's interesting, actually. Then, after the Reformation, there spawned more of these. It's kind of fascinating, where in one case, when you have a despotic church, when you have a tyrannical church serving as rulers, remember we are called to rule as servants, not serve as rulers, that will manifest demons and also revivals, actual faithful revivals and awakenings unto God and so forth will also call out these demons to suppress as greatly as they can. But we do see these in other areas, these true demon possessions. I haven't been a part of one specifically, and briefly I want to give you a story about maybe the closest I've come to it. And I don't want to give too many details because, I'm not trying to castigate anybody in particular. But when I was a young Christian, very young Christian, I went to a retreat. I'll just put it that simply, a retreat. And, this was a non-denominational church in which we joined when we came to Christ. Now, again, very young Christian in the faith. And so everybody, I thought knew the ways of God and so forth. And so when I was at this retreat, they began this, many men began these practices, ultimately prophesying, speaking in tongues, and all sorts of manifestations that we see in the Word of God. They were prophesying over me. This became a big deal. They all started prophesying. One guy prophesied even that, I would have, there was like a field of much wheat, and, I was speaking and so forth. And like this, I guess was supposed to encourage me. It's one of the things that discouraged me from the ministry because, there was all sorts of sweating. But again, to keep this succinct, there was nothing in there of God that I found. All of that I found absolutely of the devil. We are not, this, and then after this, I would have these disputes with them, considering glossolalia, the speaking in tongues and so forth, and this prophesying specifically, how they were doing it and so on. Paul warns us against this over and over and over again. We are not called to join in the assembly and try to muster up all these spiritual gifts. We are given spiritual gifts to speak cogently, to edify and to build up the church. This is one of my points of contention when these people speak nonsense and there's nobody to interpret. That's even something that Paul said. There's nobody to interpret. You're essentially just a resounding gong. You're just a noise. You're just noise, not edifying. You're not building anything up. So, this can manifest in many different ways. When you let the demon world come in through your own pride, as we saw with Leviathan and so forth, then you give them access, more access than they otherwise would have. Now, briefly, we will get into this, God willing, anyway, towards the conclusion. But if you were to ask me, can a Christian, a true Christian, be possessed by a demon? I would categorically say no. Because where the Spirit of God resides, no demon would ever possess. Now, demon possession, truly, the etymological derivation, what it's really saying is demon occupation. Demon possession and essentially controlling you. They own you. They possess you. Now, this can only happen through gradual degradation. Okay, so this man, now that doesn't always have to be the case. Remember the Syrophoenician woman who came imploring Jesus, begging Jesus for mercy because of her severely demon-possessed daughter. And again, I mentioned then that there's at least a hint that maybe, possibly, she thought her daughter was demon-possessed because of her wickedness, and she's imploring mercy for her. That's not automatic. Another just as good interpretation would be that she's imploring his mercy for a mother. This is a suffering mother. This should be good enough anyway. But could very well be that she thought it was on account of her sin. But we see this man. We see this man specifically, and because we're going to have to pick and choose which verses, because again, this is just like we just did. Okay, we only have a limited amount of time, and so this man is roaming around naked. Remember, and residing in the tombs and so forth, but naked. Nakedness brought about shame in the fall. So when, sadly, even these nudist colonies, but even more specifically, this terrible pornography that fills the internet and much else besides, these are people who have killed their conscience. It was a great fall in which Adam and Eve fell. Great fall. But they were still at least ashamed. They didn't handle it the best of ways. They went and hid, tried to cover themselves vainly, pathetically, but at least they were ashamed. At least they were ashamed. They weren't about to walk in the midst of the garden before God, naked as sinners. Nakedness now exposes ourselves to the wrath of God. Because when we are naked in sin, then we expose ourselves by our sins to a just, holy God who is full of wrath and who is ready to execute his judgment at any moment. Remember that sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, from Jonathan Edwards. You are at the precipice of hell at every moment, the fallen. You're at the precipice of hell at every moment, and the only thing that's keeping you from falling is the arbitrary benevolence of God. Okay? So ultimately, he's manifesting these traits that we see in our own world. That's all I'm saying. That's ultimately the point. We want to separate ourselves from this barbaric age and so forth. The same thing is happening now. The demons in the Old Testament were actually those to whom the idols, ultimately, that the Israelites would sacrifice to and pray to and so forth, even offering and sacrificing their children to the god of Molech. But this was to give them favor, okay? Just whatever defense that that's even possible to give. But they were sacrificing their own children to this demon god, just like we are doing now. The abortion epidemic is a sad one, of which God weeps and of which God will judge and absolutely tear down. But we are not far from this barbaric age. That's what I'm saying. Thousands and thousands of years ago, people make fun of these people for the things they believe, yet we ourselves manifest the same things. Our age is not as enlightened as we think. We think we have reached the pinnacle of all understanding, of all technology. I think 1,000 years from now, the medical professionals of that day will look down on us. Remember, mystery is the vital element of dogmatics. Yet, the secularist, the naturalist, is far more dogmatic in his naturalism, even knowing he doesn't have the answers to everything. He doesn't have the answers, so it's the Christian. It's truly through the Judeo-Christian perspective that mystery is truly the vital element of dogmatics. We can only know so much of this. But as we were alluding to in our last message, there's a danger here. There's really a two-sided danger. One, considering these are not at all real, just a figment of somebody's imagination thousands and thousands of years ago, or many people's imagination. The other danger is giving them too much credit, too much consideration, assigning to them too much power. Again, they are still under the providence and rule of God. Okay, so The truth resides somewhere in the middle. Okay, they are real. This is a real thing that goes on. And if you are ever enticed by something, that I remember C.S. Lewis's Screw Tapes Letters, I mean, I think would be a great thing to read. The insight of that man was just incredible. But I remember one specific thing that Wormwood was writing to his nephew, or to his nephew Wormwood, that most people assume that our greatest work is putting things into the mind of people. He says, whereas the truth is, our greatest work is actually keeping things out. They want to keep the truth of God out, and so they will allure you. They will allure you with something beautiful, something you like, that is not of God, but they will bring it to you as angels of light. This is what you want. And so they will feed you with what they know you will be most tempted with. Again, they are not omniscient. They are not omnipotent. They do not have all the power and all the knowledge and all the understanding of the world, but they are far more powerful than we are, and they are far more knowledgeable than we are. Satan knows you more than you do. God knows you more than he does. Okay? That's our solace. That's our peace. Okay? But we wrestle against principalities and powers. Okay? So that's the background. Okay? This is a real realm. Okay? Now, just after Jesus calms the sea, now remember the reaction of his disciples. They were full of fear. They were sore afraid. Kind of like the shepherds when the angels appeared singing to the glory of God in Christ's coming and so forth. The shepherds were made sore afraid. They became sore afraid. So the disciples when Jesus calmed the storm. And so just after that, and I don't want to get into this too much, but I think they, in order to stay away from any storm, you just calm that storm, that's great, but maybe another one's going to muster up. So I think they possibly just went to the nearest area, because this is actually a Gentile land. It's part of the Decapolis, and we're not going to get into that. It's part of the 10 Gentile cities that were still in the region of Israel and Samaria and so forth. Okay, so these are Jewish areas, but within this Jewish area, there are Gentile cities. Okay, so he's coming to this area, and that's why there are pigs. Okay, now as soon as he gets there, as soon as he comes out of the boat, the demon, when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshiped him. Now, this is profound. Who's coming and worshiping him? Is it the demons or is it the man? Did the man see Jesus and the little bit of control that he did have, did he run to Jesus? I think this is a shared experience. In other words, the goodness of Christ, the sovereignty of Christ, the demons every knee shall bow. They are all under the sovereignty and command of Jesus Christ, and they all bow to him. And so when these demons see the Son of God, as soon as he gets out of the boat, they run. So essentially, Jesus never leaves the beach of this place. He comes, he lands, he gets out, and that's about as far as he ever gets in this account. But as soon as he sees Jesus, he ran and worshiped him. Both the demons and this man, I'm convinced, came and fell at his knees. Now, and he cried out with a loud voice and said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" Now, the literal translation of "what have I to do with you, Jesus" is "what to me and you." In the Greek, it's literally "what to me and you," and I don't know what to make of that. However, ultimately what he's saying is, what do you have to do with us? What do we have to do with you right now? It's in Matthew's gospel where he says, have you come to torment us before the time? And we'll get into that here in a minute. But they call him the Son of the Most High God. Now remember, when Jesus calmed the storm and so forth, the disciples ask, what manner of man is this? Essentially, who is this? The demons shortly thereafter answer, he is the Son of the Most High God. Now, an interesting thing about this term, the Most High God was a title of God in these Gentile areas. Otherwise, in Jewish areas, it would have been the Son of Yahweh, or the Son of Jehovah, the Most High God, or the Almighty, is of Gentile nomenclature. So, I implore you by God that you do not torment me. Again, it's in Matthew, where it says, before the time. Now, so the demons and the devil know that they are on borrowed time. And this is not a contest between equals. Okay, they're essentially begging for Jesus' mercy, but they're asking, have you come to torment us before the time? Now, this might make us ask the question. Jesus didn't know the day or the hour of his return and so forth. Do the demons? No. Even the most depraved, even the most recalcitrant, who know they're going to hell and know they're on borrowed time, always sees the delay of God as something of a boon for themselves. And so ultimately, they always assume that God's delaying. They always are waiting for the time, thinking that it's far off. It's just an assumption. It's just an assumption. Again, these demons are hanging by a thread, and they know it. They don't know the time, and they don't know the hour. But ultimately, they see the Son of Man coming and not sending them into the abyss. So obviously, this isn't the time. This isn't the time. And he doesn't yet send them into the abyss, and we'll make a point of that. However, I just want to make the point, they don't know the hour. They don't know the hour. They are just as men and women do. We think, we know we have a finite time on this earth, but we take it for granted. We still think we have so much more time, and we can get hit by a bus tomorrow or an hour from now. We have no idea. We are not guaranteed 70 years or 70 and 10 or anything else. We are limited. We are limited in time and space and so forth. So, please do not torment me. For he said to him, so this is before this demon said this. Okay, so Jesus said, come out of the man, unclean spirit. Then the demons respond this way. Then he asked him, so they're imploring him. He first said to come out. He commands him. This is the command of the Son of God. And they argue. They contend with him, but they're asking for his mercy. Ultimately, okay, we are definitely going to submit to you, but this is before the time. Please don't send us into the abyss, okay? I know you're going to let us out, draw us out of here. You're commanding us already, but please do not torment us before the time. Then he asked him, what is your name? Who are you? Remember, the disciples were asking, who is this man? Now, Jesus is asking this demon-possessed man, what is your name? And he answered, saying, my name is Legion, for we are many. Also, we begged him earnestly that he would not send them out of the country. Now, my name is Legion. In this time frame, we've made the point that a legion in the Roman military would be about upwards of 6,000 soldiers. That doesn't guarantee there are 6,000 demons. Ultimately, this means that there are thousands of demons possessing this man. Jesus says, he's talking to the Pharisees, what good is it, if you travel sea and so forth to make one convert, if you make him twice the son of hell as he was prior? Ultimately, there are gradations of this possession. That's what I'll say. There are gradations of this demon influence. In the Bible, it talks about maybe one demon having influence over an entire nation. And then many demons have an influence over one person. Just like God also has one angel sometimes protecting a whole nation. And then many angels residing with his people and helping and ministering to his people and so forth. But so there are gradations. Okay, there's a continuum of sorts. Also, he begged him earnestly that he would not send them out of the country. Now, a large herd of swine was feeding there near the mountains. So all the demons begged him, saying, send us to the swine that we may enter them. So, again, now another term of demons, especially used in the Old Testament, but it's also included in the New Testament, are unclean spirits. So, these unclean spirits are ultimately asking to enter into unclean animals. The pigs, especially in the Jewish paradigm, are very unclean animals. But the Romans back in this time, especially the soldiers, loved pork. I like pork. especially bacon. I'm a big fan. Okay, so don't have a problem with pigs, but we have to understand the context in which this is taking place. Okay, so, and then once Jesus gave them permission, again, in Matthew's gospel, he says that Jesus says, go. Ultimately, be gone. He's telling them, he's given them permission, but ultimately he's saying, get out of here. Fine. I won't send you into the abyss. You want to go into the pigs? Fine. Go. Get out of this, man. Whatever. Fine. Be gone. Then the unclean spirits went out and entered the swine. There were about 2,000 pigs, so there are at least 2,000 demons. And I have conjecture I'm not going to give. And the herd ran violently down the steep place into the sea and drowned in the sea. So, much consternation stems from this. You know, PETA has a field day with messages like this. The secularists think this shows the barbarianism of Jesus, because we don't have the time. And let me just put this very simply. Jesus knows, as any of us should, that we are made in the image of God. We are given dominion over creation. So we ought to take care of them. We ought to care for them and so forth. But I'm convinced that if there were 2,000 sheep roaming this area, that he would have permitted them to enter them. In other words, it's not because it was the pigs. It was because he wanted to save this man at whatever cost. So whoever, whether it's PETA, whatever, animal rights activists and so forth, accuse Jesus of malice with this, let us also remember that, yeah, you know, these demons were sacrificed through the pigs. However, Jesus himself sacrificed himself for his people. So he liberated this man by giving these demons permission to go into these pigs. Ultimately, he acquiesced, says, no, it's not time. It's not time for these demons to be tormented in the great abyss. Right, time is coming. So he acquiesced. The Son of God actually acquiesced to demons, to the demonic realm, and let them enter into these pigs, where they ran violently down this steep place into the sea. Now, much mystery surrounds this. I mean, you know, the pigs have no moral compass. You know, there's no fall. they're not sinners or anything. So what kind of influence would a demon have on pigs? Ultimately, their demise. They had this man always about the tombs. Ultimately, it was a living among the dead. You know, this man, ultimately they were just driving into the tomb until at last he could perish along with them and be tormented with them forever. Now, the conclusion, I want to go to Luke's account, beginning at verse 37 of chapter 8. Then the whole multitude of the surrounding region of the Gadarenes asked him to depart from them, for they were seized with great fear, and he got into the boat and returned. Now, lest we think that it was just on account of their losing this great economic marketplace kind of a situation, they actually were in awe that God has given power to this man called Jesus and so forth. But they were filled with great fear, just as the disciples were. Disciples didn't ask Jesus to leave. Now, we do remember, though, I pray, that Peter did. Peter did. Remember when unexpectedly, right after he was exhausted, and Jesus tells him to go out one more time for a catch, and then they can't even bring it up. And because of this, Peter comes and begs him. But he says, I know I'm a sinful man. I can't, I don't deserve being in your presence. That is not the fear that these people have. These people know what went on and begged him earnestly to depart, to leave. We can't stand you. Not because we are sinners, but because you are holy. Because you are holy. You know, many people will imply that if they were just to see some physical manifestation of God, they would believe, when in reality, that would lead them into a greater disbelief. that would drive them even further from God. We see that throughout the testimony of the scriptures. If a fallen man, one who knows not God and despises him, if God were to ever visit him in a special manner, outside of his grace and so forth, if he just manifested himself in some physical manner, fallen men and women would reject him, just like these people did. Get out of here. Get out of here. We want nothing to do with you. Now the man from whom the demons had departed, right after that, and he got into the boat and returned. Now again, he got into the boat and returned because he had a mission for 2 daughters just after this. So I hope we can see now, through the providence of God and his great manifestation through his son, how these stories are going, how these narratives are going, and how they line up. Now the man from whom the demons had departed begged him that he might be with him. What a wonderful, wonderful account. What a wonderful narrative. This man who has now been liberated. We don't know how long. Luke is the only one who says that he was possessed for a very long time. For a very long time. So it makes sense. On the one hand, I just want to be with you, Jesus. I want to make sure I know I'm safe and sound with you. On the other hand, everybody's been seeing me naked for years now. It'd be kind of embarrassing to hang out here. I'd like to go with you wherever you're going. And that'd be fun. But he wanted to go with Jesus. But Jesus sent him away, saying, return to your own house and tell what great things God has done for you. And he went his way and proclaimed throughout the whole city what great things Jesus had done for him. Now, so Jesus sent him away because Jesus will always abide with this man, just as he always abides with his people. So he's not sending him away from his presence. He's sending him physically away, but he will always be with him. Okay, so that's wonderful. Okay, but he commands him, return to your own house, really to your own friends and family. Who can you imagine? Upon this man's return, he is absolutely different. He's finally in his sound mind, clothed. It also shows us this man, these people see him in his right mind, clothed at the feet of Jesus. What a precious picture. But ultimately, Jesus is telling him, return to your own house, go as a testimony to these people you love. To these people you love. And I know you're greatly ashamed, but I have saved you. I have redeemed you. You are no longer to be ashamed under Christ. And tell what great things God has done for you. So that's great, right? That's his command. And he went his way and proclaimed throughout the whole city, not just his house, the great things Jesus had done for him. Lest we think that this man disobeyed Jesus. By proclaiming what Jesus did, he was proclaiming what God did. They are one. They are one. So the testimony of Jesus is the testimony of God. Now, again, Christ abides. I wanted to give you, in conclusion, what Paul says in Ephesians chapter 6. This is a very familiar passage, but verses 10 through 13. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. So we withstand in order to at last stand. I love this portion. But the armor of God, the whole armor of God, is manifested in the cross of Jesus Christ. This word means nothing outside of the cross. So this is our buckler and shield and so forth as well. This is our protection. This is our sword. This is our javelin and so on. This is our weapon, but this is also our protection. But all of that is manifested because of the cross of Jesus Christ. So the great power, the great might, and the dark forces, however tremendous these forces might be, have all been conquered on Calvary. He will not lose one. He has not lost one. He will never lose one. As powerful as these might seem, and as provoked as they might provoke someone to absolute degeneracy, to absolute darkness, the light of the world remains the light of the world. And God willing, he sheds his light upon those in the midst of great darkness, thick darkness, and radiates his light more and more through sanctification, putting on the whole armor of God so that we might withstand in order to at last stand into his full radiance, to the full light of the Lamb. Now, as we conclude this section regarding the demons, again, we are going to consider the meeting between Satan and the Son of God next week, and we will have more to say on this topic. Greater is he who is in us than he who is in the world. Let us never forget that. Let us never forget that. We must not, pass this over as nothing. The devil isn't nothing. The demons aren't nothing. But they are not greater than Christ. They're not greater than God. They're not even greater than the faith that God has given you. So put on the whole armor of God, that you might withstand the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Praise God. Let's pray.